My wife plotted to destroy me and take everything until I exposed her secret scheme, won custody, protected the kids, and took my life back forever. A few nights ago, I stumbled upon a truth so devastating it felt like my entire life had been a lie. I was at work late, testing the new security system I'd installed at home, a cutting-edge piece of tech with crystal-clear video and audio capabilities. I'd been fiddling with its features for days, syncing it to my phone, adjusting settings. That night, I finally had a moment to try out the live feed. The system was so advanced it could pick up the faintest sounds with astonishing clarity, even quiet conversations in the background. I tapped into the app, curious to see how it worked in real time. At first, all I heard was faint ambient noise from the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of floorboards. But then voices came through. My wife Kate was talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice was calm, almost casual, but something about her tone made me pause. I turned up the volume, leaning closer to my phone. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Kate said, a hint of amusement in her voice. My stomach tightened. Was she talking about me? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the way she spoke, so relaxed, so confident, made my pulse quicken. The voice on the other end of the call was muffled, but Kate's laughter cut through like a knife. No, he's clueless," she continued. "Albert, please. He's too wrapped up in his little gadgets to notice what's right in front of him." Her words hit me like a slap. I froze, my mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? I wanted to believe I'd misheard her, that there was some innocent explanation. But then her tone shifted. The laughter disappeared, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. "Okay, hold on. Let me call you back," she said quickly. A second later, I heard her dialing another number. My heart pounded as I realized she wasn't done. I adjusted the feed, holding my breath as the audio picked up again. "Hi, thanks for calling me back," Kate said, her voice now sharp and professional. "Yes, I've made my decision. We'll move forward with the plan." Plan? What plan? My mind was spiraling, desperate to piece together what I was hearing. The silence on the other end of the call only made her next words more chilling. "Once we pin this on him," she said slowly, her words deliberate, "I'll take the kids, the house, and everything else. He won't see it coming." My hands clenched the phone so tightly it hurt. Her voice was so steady, so calculated, like she was discussing a business deal and not dismantling our entire life. My jaw tightened as she continued. "No, it won't be an issue," she said, almost casually. "Jake's already lined everything up. All we need is for Albert to stay predictable, and trust me, he always is." Jake. That name shot through me like a dagger. Jake was her coworker, the one she'd always brushed off as a friend, the one I'd dismissed as harmless despite the nagging doubts in the back of my mind. Hearing his name now, in this context, made my blood run cold. Kate let out a short laugh, like the conversation was amusing her. "He'll never see it coming," she repeated, her voice dripping with confidence. I sat there in my office, paralyzed by what I'd just heard. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a cold, calculated plot to destroy me. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere, but I was too blind, or too trusting, to see them for what they were. It wasn't just one thing. It was a series of small, unsettling moments that, at the time, I dismissed as normal hiccups in a long marriage. But now they felt like the breadcrumbs of a calculated betrayal. It started months ago. Kate began spending long stretches in the backyard, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. She always claimed she was catching up with old friends, but the calls were oddly secretive. Her laughter would float through the air, light and carefree, but sometimes I'd catch fragments of her words. Once I distinctly heard her say, "You're right, he really is oblivious." When I asked her later what that was about, she brushed it off with a smile. "Just girl talk," she said, and I didn't press further. Now I wonder if every one of those conversations was part of something bigger, something she was plotting right under my nose. The arguments started not long after. They were small at first, almost silly fights over things like where the car keys were, or why the groceries weren't put away properly. But they escalated quickly, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard before. I remember one time after one of her long calls, she stormed into the house furious that I hadn't taken the trash out yet. It was 10 minutes past the usual time. 10 minutes. And it turned into a full-blown shouting match, with her calling me lazy and unreliable. At the time, I chalked it up to stress, but now I wonder, was she looking for reasons to paint me as the bad guy? It wasn't just her tone, it was the way she looked at me during those arguments. Her eyes weren't filled with anger or frustration. They were calculating, like she was cataloging every word I said, every reaction I had. There was something almost rehearsed about her outbursts, as if she was trying to provoke me, to get me to say or do something she could later use against me. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it felt intentional, strategic. I'd catch her staring at me sometimes, a faint smirk playing on her lips, like she knew something I didn't. Those moments would pass quickly, and she'd go back to her normal self, laughing with the kids or scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. But something had changed. I could feel it even if I couldn't put my finger on it. And then there were the little things she started doing that made no sense, changing the password on her phone for security reasons, insisting on handling all the bills herself when we'd always done it together, or canceling plans at the last minute because she was too tired. At the time, I saw these as quirks, maybe even signs of her needing some space. Now they feel like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was supposed to solve. In hindsight, it's so clear. Every fight, every hushed call, every cold glance. It wasn't just a symptom of a rough patch. It was her building a case against me, brick by brick, while I stood there oblivious to the walls closing in around me. The moment it all came crashing down wasn't because of some forgotten phone or suspicious text. It was much messier than that. It was in the middle of one of those explosive arguments that had become our new normal. This time it was about the thermostat. She stormed into the kitchen, shouting about how I'd left it set too high, and I shot back asking why every little thing seemed to set her off lately. That's when it happened. "Maybe if you listened for once, Jake, we wouldn't have to go through this," she snapped, her face flushed with anger. Time froze. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Jake. Not Albert, not even Babe or Honorable. Jake. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing into a glare. "What?" she said, her tone sharp, like she was daring me to call her out. My stomach churned, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Did you just call me Jake?" I asked, my words measured, deliberate. She scoffed, rolling her eyes as she turned away. "Don't be ridiculous, Adalbert," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're overthinking again. You always do this. You're so paranoid." But her slip had already cut deeper than any knife. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of remorse, of guilt. Instead, all I saw was anger, venomous, calculated anger, as if this was somehow my fault. "Who the hell is Jake?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. She crossed her arms, glaring at me like I was the problem. "You're being insane," she snapped. "Jake is nobody, just stop it." Her deflection only made the pit in my stomach grow. My mind raced, connecting dots I didn't even know existed until that moment. Jake, the name she'd just let slip, wasn't nobody. He was somebody. He was the coworker she'd always laughed a little too hard with at office parties, the one she'd insisted was just a friend when I'd asked about him months ago. I took a step closer, my voice cold now. "Don't lie to me, Kate. Is Jake the reason for all of this? The phone calls? The fights? The secrets?" Her face twisted into a mask of indifference, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "You're unbelievable," she said, shaking her head like I was some irrational fool. "I don't have to stand here and listen to this." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, her words echoing in my mind. "You're paranoid. Jake is nobody." But her slip had already exposed everything. Jake wasn't nobody. He was the answer to all the questions I hadn't dared to ask before, and now there was no turning back. The need for answers clawed at me like a sickness. I couldn't take her evasions, her lies, her venomous attempts to paint me as crazy. So one evening, when Kate grabbed her keys and muttered something about meeting a friend, I made a decision. I would follow her. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my own keys and tailed her car at a safe distance. My palms were slick with sweat as I maneuvered through the streets, keeping my headlights dimmed, staying just far enough back. I watched her weave through town, taking turns that led out of our usual stomping grounds and into the wealthier part of the city. The houses grew larger, the driveways longer, the gates taller. She finally slowed near a sprawling estate surrounded by high hedges and a black iron gate. My chest tightened as I watched her pull into the driveway. A few moments later, the gate slid open and she disappeared inside. I killed my engine and parked down the street, just out of view. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely think. What was she doing here? Who did she know in a place like this? I crept closer on foot, careful to stay in the shadows of the manicured trees lining the street. As I reached the edge of the property, I spotted them, Kate and Jake through the slats of the gate. They were standing near the entrance to the house, bathed in the warm glow of the porch light. Kate was laughing, her arm casually draped over his shoulder, her body language so familiar, so intimate it made my stomach churn. Jake leaned in close, his hand resting possessively on her waist as he said something that made her laugh even harder. It wasn't the laugh she shared with me. It was lighter, more carefree, like she was a different person entirely when she was with him. I strained to hear them, crouching behind a low hedge just outside the gate. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments of their conversation, words that sent a fresh wave of anger and confusion crashing over me. "When this is over," Kate said, her voice trailing off into a giggle. Jake's response was quieter, but his tone was unmistakably serious. "We need to get it done faster. I don't want this dragging out." My mind raced. What were they talking about? What needed to be done? And why was she laughing about it? I stayed there, hidden, watching them like a stranger spying on someone else's life. The life I thought I had with her was unraveling right in front of me, piece by piece. I wanted to burst through the gate, to demand answers, to confront her with everything I knew, or thought I knew. But I stayed frozen, torn between fury and desperation, afraid of what else I might uncover if I stepped closer. After a few minutes, they went inside, the door closing behind them. I stood there in the dark, my fists clenched, my mind reeling. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I'd imagined, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what I'd find next. Dinner started out like any other, the sound of utensils clinking against plates and the kids chatting about their day filling the room. I sat there barely touching my food, my heart pounding as I rehearsed the words in my head. The weight of what I'd seen at Jake's estate, what I'd overheard, was too much to carry alone. I needed to confront her, and I needed her to face the truth, not just in front of me, but in front of the kids too. Maybe if she saw their faces, she'd feel some shred of shame, some flicker of guilt. "Kate," I said, my voice calm but firm, cutting through the noise. She glanced up from her plate, her fork midair. The kids looked at me, puzzled by my tone. "What?" she said, her expression neutral, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes, weariness maybe. "I know about Jake," I said. My words landed like a thunderclap in the room. The kids froze, their eyes darting between us, confusion etched on their faces. Kate's hand paused, her fork hovering for a second before she slowly set it down. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm, her face a mask of feigned innocence. "Don't do that," I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Don't play dumb. I know what's been going on, the calls, the meetings, the lies, I know everything." "Everything." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, her expression shifting to something colder, more calculating. And then, to my shock, she smirked. "You're pathetic, Adelbert," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You're delusional." The kids looked at her, their faces filled with confusion and fear. "Mom?" our daughter whispered, her voice trembling. But Kate didn't even glance at her. Her eyes were locked on mine, daring me to push further. "This isn't just about me believing it, Kate," I shot back. "It's about the truth, about what you've been doing behind my back while pretending everything's fine." She laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd just told her the most ridiculous joke she'd ever heard. "The truth?" she scoffed. "Oh, please, you've been paranoid for months, always snooping, always suspicious. Maybe if you spent more time being a decent husband and less time playing detective, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." Her words hit me like a slap, but what struck me even harder was the way she looked at me, with absolute contempt, like I was beneath her. "I saw you with him, Kate," I said, my voice shaking now, the fury and betrayal overwhelming me. "At his house, laughing, talking about getting it done faster. What the hell were you planning? Tell me." But she just rolled her eyes, her smirk never faltering. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said dismissively. "And even if you did, who's going to believe you? Me, the loving wife and mother, or you, the unstable lunatic who's been stalking his own wife?" I glanced at the kids. Their wide, terrified eyes stared at both of us. My daughter looked like she was on the verge of tears, while my son sat frozen, gripping his fork like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. "That's enough," I shouted, slamming my fist on the table. The plates rattled, and the kids flinched, but Kate didn't even blink. She leaned forward now, her smirk fading into something darker, more menacing. "You're out of your depth, Adelbert," she said quietly, her voice dripping with malice. "Keep pushing, and you'll regret it. Trust me." It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. And in that moment I realized just how far gone she was, and how much danger I was truly in. That night, I sat alone in my study, staring at the family photo on my desk. In it, we were all smiles. Me, Kate, the kids. A picture-perfect family. But the truth had shattered that illusion. The woman I thought I knew, the life we'd built together, was nothing but a lie. Her words from dinner echoed in my mind. "You're pathetic, Adalbert." The smirk, the venom, the threat. It was all I needed to know that reasoning with her was pointless. She wasn't going to stop, and if she was willing to destroy me, I wasn't going to sit back and make it easy for her. I opened my laptop, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I logged into our bank accounts, staring at the balances, savings, checking, joint investments. It was all sitting there, ripe for the taking. I thought about how she'd laugh if I let her walk away with everything, how she'd probably celebrate with Jake once she'd wiped me out. My jaw tightened. Not a chance. With a few clicks, I initiated the transfers, draining every last cent into a new account I'd opened in my name weeks earlier, when my suspicions first began to surface. I didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess myself. By the time I was done, the accounts were empty, the credit cards canceled, and the auto payments for her gym, her subscriptions, and her flashy new car all turned off. I left just enough in the kids' college fund. It wasn't their fault any of this was happening. But for Kate, nothing. She'd made it clear I was her target, and now I was making it clear I wasn't going down without a fight. Before I walked out, I grabbed a piece of paper and scrawled a single sentence across it. No long explanations, no pleas for her to reconsider. Just 7 words that said everything I needed to say. You can't steal what's already gone. I placed the note on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee machine she used every morning, and left the house. No bags packed, no dramatic farewell, just the clothes on my back and the knowledge that I was finally in control. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting to her games. I was taking action, and while I didn't know what she'd do when she found out, one thing was certain: the playing field had shifted, and this time it was on my terms. The next day, I braced myself for the storm I knew was coming. Kate was many things: vindictive, cunning, relentless. But above all, she was predictable when cornered. Still, even knowing her nature, I wasn't prepared for just how far she'd go. It was around midday when she stormed into my office. I was in the middle of reviewing some reports when the door flew open, slamming against the wall. Heads popped out from nearby cubicles, my colleagues craning their necks to see what was happening. And there she was. Kate, dressed to perfection but with fury blazing in her eyes. "Adalbert!" she shrieked, her voice echoing down the hallway. My boss, Mr. Fletcher, had just walked by and froze mid-step, turning to look at the commotion. My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Kate," I said evenly, setting my papers down. "This isn't the time or place." "Oh, it's exactly the place," she spat, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Everyone here deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Whispers started rippling through the office as my CO workers exchanged uneasy glances. A few looked at me, silently asking if they should intervene, but I shook my head. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "Kate, let's go outside," I said, standing up, my voice measured. But she wasn't having it. "Why? So you can try to intimidate me like you always do?" she barked. Then, with a dramatic sweep of her arm, she turned to address the room. "Did you all know he has violent tendencies? Oh, he's charming here at work, I'm sure, but at home he's a completely different person." The air in the office grew tense. Mr. Fletcher stepped forward, his brow furrowed, while my colleagues exchanged glances filled with a mix of discomfort and doubt. A few whispered among themselves, some clearly unsure of how to react. I kept my face neutral, though my fists clenched at my sides. "That's enough, Kate," I said firmly. "You know that isn't true." "Oh, don't you dare," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You've been gaslighting me for years, making me feel crazy while you undermine everything I do. And now, after everything I've done for you, you drain the accounts and leave me with nothing?" There it was. This wasn't about the supposed violence. This was her retaliation for taking away her access to my hard-earned money. "Kate," I said, locking eyes with her, my voice low but steady, "you're embarrassing yourself. If you don't leave now, I'll have no choice but to call security." Her face twisted into a snarl, but I saw the flicker of doubt behind her eyes. She wanted me to snap, to prove her wild accusations true in front of everyone. But I didn't take the bait. Mr. Fletcher stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Mrs. Stevens, I suggest you leave. This is a professional workplace, and we don't tolerate this kind of behavior." Jaw clenched, her eyes darting between me and Mr. Fletcher. For a moment I thought she might escalate further. But then she let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You think you've won, Adalbert," she said, her voice icy. "This is far from over." She spun on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. The room stayed silent for a beat before the murmur of whispers returned. Mr. Fletcher gave me a long, assessing look before nodding and walking away. I let out a slow breath, sitting back down as the adrenaline drained from my body. My CO workers avoided eye contact, pretending to be engrossed in their work, but I could feel their unease lingering in the air. Kate thought she could destroy me with lies and theatrics. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't the same man she'd manipulated for years. I had the truth, and the evidence, to protect myself, and I wasn't backing down. Kate had always been a master of appearances. Her charm was magnetic, her smile disarming, and she wielded them like weapons. So when the fallout from our confrontation at my office wasn't enough to humiliate me into submission, she pivoted. She organized a fundraiser, a grand event to raise awareness for a local charity she'd barely supported before. It was clear to anyone paying attention that the real purpose was to restore her image and make me look like the villain in the eyes of the community. But this time, I was 2 steps ahead. Days before the event, I had already planned my move. The recording of her phone call, the one where she laid out her cold, calculated plan to frame me, was my trump card. I knew timing was everything, so I waited, biding my time as she sent out invitations, curated the guest list, and meticulously prepared her speech. The night of the fundraiser arrived, and I watched from afar as people poured into the venue. It was a dazzling display of opulence, twinkling lights, elegant table settings, and a sea of well-dressed attendees. Kate stood at the center of it all, beaming, her voice ringing out as she greeted her guests. Her mask was firmly in place, and for a moment I felt a pang of disbelief that she could carry on like this after everything. When the room quieted for her speech, I knew it was time. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the send button. The email was ready, addressed to the fundraiser's entire guest list, with the recording of Kate's call attached, complete with a transcript of her damning words. "Once I pin this on him, I'll take the kids, the house, and everything else. He'll never see it coming." I pressed send. From where I stood, just out of view of the event, I watched the ripple effect begin. Guest phones vibrated and pinged in unison, the sound cutting through the polite applause as Kate launched into her speech. At first it was subtle, people pulling out their phones, glancing down, their brows furrowing as they read. Then came the whispers. They spread like wildfire, growing louder and louder until the hum of murmurs filled the room. Kate faltered mid-sentence, her eyes darting around the room. She noticed the shift, the stolen glances, the disapproving stares, the shocked expressions. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice losing its practiced poise. No one answered her. Instead, the whispers turned into audible snippets. "Did you hear what she said? Can you believe this? What kind of person does that?" Her composure cracked. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice shrill now, trying to regain control. But it was too late. The carefully crafted persona she'd spent years perfecting was crumbling before her eyes. Someone in the crowd stepped forward, a local businesswoman who had always supported Kate's charity events. She held up her phone, her expression one of cold disdain. "Care to explain this, Kate?" she asked, her voice carrying across the room. Kate's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her confidence slipping with every word. "Oh, really?" the woman replied, shaking her phone. "Because this recording makes it pretty clear who you are, and it's not the person you've been pretending to be." The room erupted into chaos. Guests were no longer whispering, they were openly confronting her, questioning her integrity, her motives. Kate's voice was drowned out by the noise, her protest falling on deaf ears. She looked around, desperate for an ally, but found none. I turned and walked away, the sounds of her unraveling echoing behind me. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd taken back control. She'd underestimated me, and now she was paying the price for her lies and deceit. The fallout was swift and merciless. By the day after the fundraiser, Kate's name was on everyone's lips, but not in a way she'd envisioned. The recording spread like wildfire, forwarded and shared among the town's most influential figures. I made sure of it. Every person who mattered, her charity circles, her social clubs, even her parents, received a copy of the recording. No one could claim ignorance of who Kate really was anymore. Jake, her so-called ally, was the first to abandon ship. I heard through the grapevine that he'd gone radio silent, no longer returning her calls or texts. The golden boy co-worker who'd been so eager to get it done faster suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. I wasn't surprised. For someone like Jake, self-preservation was everything, and aligning himself with a sinking ship like Kate would only drag him down. Kate, on the other hand, didn't go quietly. She tried to salvage what little she could of her reputation, calling friends and allies, spinning story after story about how the recording was taken out of context or completely fabricated. But the evidence was undeniable, and the town wasn't buying her lies anymore. Her friends, many of whom had been swept up in her charm for years, stopped answering her calls. Her name became a toxic topic at brunches and cocktail parties, spoken in hushed tones with sideways glances. Even her parents, who had always doted on her, refused to defend her this time. From what I heard, they were furious, not just because of the scandal, but because they too had believed in the image she'd so carefully constructed. The humiliation hit her hardest when she tried to show up at one of her regular haunts, a boutique cafe where she used to hold court with her circle of admirers. The once friendly staff avoided eye contact, and the usual smiles from acquaintances turned into awkward nods or outright snubs. Kate, for all her bravado, was visibly shaken, her carefully curated world crumbling around her. Meanwhile, I stayed in the background, watching as her lies unraveled. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching someone you once loved self-destruct, but there was a grim sense of justice in knowing the truth was out there, that her web of manipulation could no longer ensnare anyone else. By the end of the week, Kate's calls to the kids' school to complain about me were ignored. Her attempts to rally legal support for a case against me were laughed out of the room. Every piece of her plan had fallen apart, leaving her exposed, alone, and exactly where she had tried to leave me, with nothing. When the custody battle began, Kate waltzed into the courtroom like she was stepping onto a stage. She had her crocodile tears ready, dressed in muted colors that screamed victim, and spun her tale with the flair of someone who had rehearsed every word. She painted me as an unfit husband, a controlling monster who had drained her accounts and abandoned her. For a moment, I wondered if the judge might buy into her act. Kate was a master manipulator after all. But then it was my turn, and I didn't need theatrics. I had the truth on my side. My lawyer presented everything: the recording of her phone call plotting to frame me, the financial records showing how she'd siphoned funds for personal luxuries while neglecting household expenses, and her blatant lies about my supposed violent tendencies. We even included testimony from several of her former friends and colleagues who had distanced themselves after learning the truth. One by one, their statements painted a picture of a woman who was calculating, manipulative, and utterly untrustworthy. Kate's confident demeanor cracked as the evidence piled up. When the recording was played in court, her face turned ashen. The judge leaned forward, listening intently as her words, her own damning words, filled the room. "Once I pin this on him, I'll take the kids, the house, and everything else. He'll never see it coming." When the audio stopped, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Kate tried to recover, insisting the recording was taken out of context and that she'd only said those things out of frustration. But it was too late. Her desperation was palpable, her arguments crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense man with little patience for deceit, didn't mince words. "Mrs. Stevens," he said, his tone sharp, "your behavior as documented here demonstrates a clear pattern of manipulation and bad faith. This court cannot, in good conscience, place the children in your care." Kate gasped, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. "Your Honor, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I'm their mother." And as their mother, the judge interrupted. "Your actions should reflect their best interests, not your own selfish agenda. Custody is awarded to Mr. Stevens. Furthermore, given the financial evidence presented, your request for alimony is denied." I sat there, the weight of months of turmoil finally lifting as the judge's gavel came down. Kate's face was a mix of disbelief and rage, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words to lash out. But none came. She was out of moves, and she knew it. As we left the courtroom, she caught up to me in the hallway, her voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this, Adelbert," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. I turned to her, calm and resolute. "No, Kate," I said. The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner." She didn't respond. She simply stood there, watching as I walked away, the kids waiting for me just outside the doors. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The fight was over, and I had won, not out of spite, but because it was the right thing for me and for our children. Even after losing in court, Kate wasn't finished. She was like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. I should have known she'd try something drastic, but even I couldn't predict just how low she'd go. A few weeks after the custody ruling, a police officer showed up at my door. My stomach sank as he handed me a notice. Kate had filed a report claiming I'd assaulted her. According to her statement, I'd violently attacked her just days after the court decision. She'd even provided photos of bruises on her arms and face as evidence. At first, I felt a surge of panic. Her lies had worked on so many people in the past. What if this time they stuck? But as I sat with my lawyer reviewing the report and the so-called evidence, my panic gave way to anger. This wasn't just another lie. This was a calculated attempt to ruin my life completely. Kate had made one crucial mistake, though. She underestimated how much credibility she'd already lost. Between the court recordings, her failed fundraiser, and the countless people who now saw her for who she really was, her word carried little weight anymore. When the investigation began, it unraveled faster than she could have imagined. The bruises she'd shown in the photos were inconsistent with her story. Medical professionals reviewing the images identified signs of makeup rather than real injuries. The police also requested timestamps and metadata for the photos, which Kate conveniently couldn't provide. Then came the final nail in the coffin. Surveillance footage from a local cafe on the day of the alleged incident showed Kate laughing and chatting with friends, completely uninjured. The footage went viral after it was leaked online, and the public's reaction was brutal. She became the subject of mockery and scorn. Her name splashed across social media alongside memes and hashtags calling her out for her lies. When the police dismissed the case for lack of evidence, they didn't stop there. Kate was warned that filing a false report was a criminal offense. Though no charges were pressed, the damage to her already crumbling reputation was irreversible. I heard through the grapevine that even her remaining allies, those who'd clung to her out of loyalty or ignorance, had finally abandoned her. Her name became synonymous with deceit, a punchline in conversations around town. As for me, I refused to let her final scheme consume me. I had my kids, my peace of mind, and the truth. Kate's desperate games only solidified what I already knew. I was free of her manipulation, and she was left with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. As I sit here now, months after the dust has finally settled, I can't help but reflect on everything that's happened. This was, without a doubt, the hardest year of my life. I lost the version of my family I thought I had, the woman I thought I knew, and the life I believed we were building together. But through all of it, the lies, the betrayals, the schemes, I found something I didn't realize I'd lost, myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's the importance of trusting your instincts. Those nagging doubts, those little signs that something isn't right. They're there for a reason. For months, I ignored mine, convinced that the cracks in our marriage were just stress or routine disagreements. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Looking back, I wish I'd listened sooner, but I'm grateful I listened when I did. Standing your ground is another lesson that came hard but is worth everything. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to let her lies and manipulation win just to escape the constant battles. But every time I looked at my kids, I knew I couldn't. They deserved the truth. They deserved a future free from the chaos she brought into our lives, and so did I. Now I'm focused on moving forward. The kids and I are settling into a new routine, one that's stable and calm, a far cry from the turmoil we used to endure. We laugh more now, talk openly, and I can see the weight lifting off their young shoulders. They're starting to feel safe again, and that alone makes every fight, every sleepless night, and every confrontation worth it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Even in the darkest times, there's a way forward. It won't be easy. It will hurt, and you'll question yourself 1,000 times. But the truth has a way of cutting through the lies, of lighting the path ahead even when everything feels lost. I hope my story serves as a warning and a reminder. Trust your gut, stand firm, and never let someone else define your worth or your future. The pain doesn't last forever, but the lessons you learn will. Now, as I look ahead, I'm not afraid anymore. The worst is behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like the best is yet to come.